Hi, I'm Muslimah Williams. I am based in Oberlin, Ohio, and I am an access coordinator. And essentially, I work with students day in, day out to find accommodations that remove barriers to access in the classroom or housing.
Hi, Muslima. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm very excited to learn more about your educator journey and what got you into the work of being an access coordinator. I think that's going to be really fascinating. I don't think I've heard of someone whose specific role is to like just remove barriers within, that the kind of like education system. So yeah, I definitely want to learn more about that. And I'm sure that there's a variety of roles that you played to get to that point, to be in that position. And then just kind of overall what motivates you and drives you to do the work that you do. Um, I'm very excited to, continue to interview classmates of mine. All of you have such unique stories, and it's just really wonderful how we're all able to like take this journey together. So yeah, we'll get into the first big question, the unpacking question. So the various milestones that you've had to traverse in this journey of yours. If you could share out a few of them and kind of bring us up to speed of like from maybe like initial moments that were quite formative or influences on your life, and then kind of up until this very point where, yeah, you're saying I'm an access coordinator in Ohio. Like,
Yeah.
take us on that journey.
For sure. So in terms of influences, definitely my parents, especially my mother, was a huge influence and continues to be. So I kind of come from a family of educators. Both of my parents were elementary, primary school teachers. Um, when I was a kid, I wanted to be anything but a teacher. But um, when I was, I guess, in high school, that's when things started to take a turn to really deciding what I wanted to do in life. And I just picked up a psychology book and instantly fell in love. And people were always kind of a mystery to me. And I felt that psychology really explained so many of those mysteries. So my passion just grew, and I eventually did my bachelor's in psychology. And then for me, it was like pretty cut and dry. Okay, jumping straight into a master's after graduating. Um, and I went to Wales with every intention of like pursuing psychology all the way to like PhD level. And when I got there, it was just not for me. So we did a little bit of uh, reevaluating. And I then decided that teaching high school would be incredible and teaching psychology. So I did a postgraduate certificate in education in England and taught high school for a while. Um, and then I moved back to the States just as COVID hit. So that was interesting. Education, as you know, was just uh, this uncharted terrain with all of the um, online learning and, the shutdowns. So I I didn't go into teaching for a while. It was a couple years, and then I really just had this dream of getting into the college in my hometown and just sort of working there. I've always wanted to be in like a helping profession or just something uplifting and like a service uh, career, I guess. So I applied for an opening and I got my dream job, which is a student accessibility coordinator. And I think very few people can say they genuinely love their work, but I'm super blessed to be one of the few. Um, the students on my campus are just absolutely incredible. And I stay in awe of their talent, and especially with the students who have so many diagnoses and disabilities that they're working through, just the barriers that they have to kind of break through every day and still like succeed and thrive is just really inspiring to me. Um, but I will have to say, I think, um, you know, working in offices for, disability services in higher education, they are a barrier in themselves because no other student has to um, go through, getting documentation and disclosing something very personal to them to a complete stranger. Um, and, going through that whole process of requesting accommodations. So I'm really fortunate to have a team who recognizes that and tries to adopt universal design as much as they can and accessible practices. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Muslima. It's just so evident in the way that you speak about your current job that you truly love the work that you do. You love the students that you serve, and that you have a great team around you
Mhm.
that has those sensibilities of like how difficult a situation some of these students might be, experiencing when they approach you. And there might be some hesitation, there might be some shame, some embarrassment, or or all of the above.
Mhm.
And yet, right, they seek help. And I would say, in the current times that we live in, being able to ask for help is a tremendous sign of courage, right? And that, ultimately that relationship that is started between the students and you and your team at the community college, like ultimately it leads to much better experience, more fruitful
Mhm.
time where they can really explore and like understand what their pathway is in life. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. So very, very happy for you. And I'm also very curious about all of these various different kind of like points in your life that form the beautiful constellation of your journey. And I wanted to, take, you know, kind of take us back to those major influences that you pointed out, right? Those being, yeah, your parents. So, I guess first question would be, what would you say are the qualities about your parents that really inspire you the most? And secondly, why why didn't you want to become a teacher in the beginning? What were some of the things that you saw from teachers around you or from the schedule of your parents that initially dissuaded you?
Yeah. I guess let's dive into the last question first. So what dissuaded me? It was definitely um, their workload. So my parents worked in small private faith-based schools. Um, my mother particularly wore many hats, as you're kind of expected to do in small schools. And so there would be constant grading, parent teacher conferences, she also helped with chartering a couple schools. So she's just this superwoman to me. But also, wherever she went, I went too. I'm the only child. So, um, and I just was always with her. So I would see the politics. I would have a little bit of access to board meetings. I would just be like kind of in the corner playing with my dolls and seeing everything unfold. And you do pick up on things when you're a child. So for me, I I felt like that realm was not for me, and I was right. You know, higher ed is definitely where it's at for me. Um, but I think yeah, the workload and uh, my mother going into the qualities now of my parents that I think were very influential on me. She's an extremely giving person. Um, very generous, definitely, I would say embodies that um uh like she is a global citizen. So and she really does a really intentional job of connecting with people from all walks of life and um uplifting, and she does it with a genuine um a very genuine intention. So that's where I draw a lot of my inspiration in checking my internal biases, whatever they might be, and trying to reflect and grow and work on acceptance and empathy. Um, yeah. So thankful for mom.
Shout out to the mom if you're
Yeah.
listening. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important to acknowledge, the parental figures, and in this case, the role that your mom played, of course, your father as well. But share a little bit about more about your mother and how she was this kind of role model of like what it meant to be a generous person. And I think that's like a wonderful way to kind of describe someone, to have that spirit of really looking at what's happening around her, what's going on in the lives of people who maybe are struggling, or that they can, I don't know, she has something, some skill or some, just even if it's just avail like her time to give,
Yeah.
and then she's wanting to do that. I think alleviating the suffering of others is just one of the best like character, qualities that someone can have. So I think that's amazing. And the way you talked about like why you didn't at first want to be a teacher makes total sense because
Yeah.
I didn't have, parents who were teachers, but I had teachers in general going from, throughout school, and there's always this sense that like a lot of them just felt tired.
Mhm.
And and I'm a teacher myself, and I'm like, oh, I'm tired too. So yeah, maybe it's just it's a enduring thing that teachers put up with a lot, um, and yet you found yourself teaching in
Yeah.
Wales, right? Of all places, that's so I definitely want to get into that experience and like what aside from a master's in like psychology, what else drew you to Wales? But before we go there, I did want to mention because like you talked about how important your mother was to you, and I remember last semester, so not too long ago, we had a Brave Communications class, and we
Hmm.
did many different speeches, and one of the TFs for my particular section, she mentioned, "Oh, Muslima had such a great speech." And I
Oh,
went and watched the speech where you talked about going to a farmer's market or some kind of like open air market, And it was, it was about your mom
Mhm.
encountering discrimination and
Mhm.
how she responded. And it was such a touching speech. And I was wondering if you'd feel comfortable to kind of share a little bit about that story. Of course, in a different way. You don't have to, I'm not going to time you for 4 minutes in class or something. But I felt like, that being, I think, your values speech really like struck a chord with a lot of people, including myself. And so I feel like that also kind of speaks to how generous a person she is.
Mhm.
But yeah, would you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about that speech?
Yeah. That's totally fine. I will say, it was a difficult speech to deliver. A lot of emotion there that I really hadn't fully unpacked. So yeah, it was uh the Lorain County Fair, actually. I don't mind popping it out there because maybe communities can grow, and it has since then. So it's definitely not the same climate as it was. I was like, I want to say it was like 2002, around that time. I was like 7 or 8, and we had gone to the fair. My dad drove us to the fair, and it was supposed to be a great little summer night of whimsy. And it was really exciting when I got there, just amazing. And I remember my dad going to get um like those like cheesy sticks that are like fried and delicious but really bad. Yeah, those. So he went off to get that, and I was walking with my mom, and uh I remember we walked past this booth, and there was a soldier there, and it was the first time I'd ever like seen uh like a soldier in real life. And uh initially I remember thinking like, wow, he looks really cool because he was in the camo uniform, and he had like a couple girls around him. And looking back, he must have been like 18 or 19, 20, very young. Um, but I remember he had like a rifle or something on him, and we were walking by, and I saw them looking at my mom and kind of like whispering and laughing, and he lifted his gun and he aimed it at my mother, and he went boom, and then they just laughed. And like, I remember looking around and just thinking, isn't anyone going to say anything? Didn't anyone see that? And so I'm looking up at these faces around me, and it was just complete, just not taking any notice. And I remember my mom's hand just tightening around me, and her pace quickened, and um, like I could feel that she was afraid, and then so I was also afraid. Um, and I told her, you know, Mom, should we go tell Dad? Should we get him? And she just said, no, Musley, we're just gonna pray for him, that God puts love in his heart. And she took that approach with so many things um, in life, things that I felt like she shouldn't have, like speak up and say something. And I remember, I've told this story before. Um, and people would just be shocked, like, oh my gosh, didn't you like report them? And when you're in this identity of what you feel is like powerlessness, and a key thing I should mention that I completely did not, because it's so much a part of her. My mom wears hijab. So she's full hijab, and um she wears like long skirts and very traditional Muslim. Um that was like a really key piece that I left out, Scott. So uh yeah, I when you're in that identity of like powerlessness, or almost you almost just you don't want to make it worse. We left, we got to safety. We didn't want to like ruffle any feathers. What if that person had followed us home? Like we don't know. So it was like growing up in this sort of um I would say like a little bit rural area of Ohio. It had its challenges, but my mother was unapologetically herself. She never changed the way that she dressed. Instead, when people would look at her and um, you know, in an odd way, she would smile and greet them, and in hoping that they would see like the person behind the veil. Um, but I had always hoped that, people would see the human first. And I think that is like a huge part of global citizenship is seeing the person first before nationality and even culture, you know? So,
Wow, that's so beautiful. No, I love that. And I thank you so much for sharing that story because as you said, right, to prepare that speech and to go back into those emotions back when you were, so young, it can be very painful. But I would imagine that by revisiting that and understanding it through another lens and reframing it and being able to really identify, well, what was it that your mom, like, what was she doing that really left such a profound mark on you? I think that's so important. It was her humanity, right? And her
mhm,
ability to rise above this, this blatant act of, just like, well, I was gonna say discrimination, but I mean, there's many more words for it, right? I think of like ignorance, of, pettiness, of childishness. As a young soldier, I mean, who knows what influences that person had,
mhm.
growing up and how they perceived. I mean, you said it was 2002 as well, right? So kind of like
Yeah.
in the wake of September 11th and the kind of
Mhm,
nationwide perception of just anyone wearing a hijab or something, to kind of like identify them as Muslim. I
mhm,
mean, terrible discrimination. So the way that you framed it as like seeing past the veil, really seeing her for who she is as a human. I think that's really it was a really touching speech, and even just the way you talked about it now, like it's still very touching and yeah, and I appreciate you for sharing that. And again,
yeah.
it connects so well to like what you initially put out as like a, you know, the core value about your mother was, service. And like in a way, the fact that like in that moment of fear, she chose she chose like nonviolence in a way, right?
Mhm,
Rather than kind of like backlash. I'm gonna like, try to make you feel just as bad as you made me feel. But she put an example for you
mhm.
and said, there is something we can do, right? We can pray for him.
Yeah.
And and the world would be a lot better a place if more people had that as their response. I mean, maybe not reflexively, right? Of course, I'm sure the cogs in her head were turned like, quickly turning
Oh,
and being
yeah.
like, what okay, this is happening. All right. Oh, my daughter's right next to me. Okay, make a call. Um, so yeah, she definitely put so much thought and care into that. But again, it just speaks to her generosity as a person. So I wanted to bring that story up because I just felt like it's so core to who you are. And yeah, then I appreciate you for sharing that and making that connection to global citizenship as well. So
Yeah.
we're making our way towards, really unpacking that further. But I appreciate you already kind of like making those connections. So the next thing I wanted to ask about, yeah, so you went to Wales to pursue a master's in psychology, and yet you found yourself teaching in high school instead. Um, what initially like attracted you to wanting to go to Wales, like to the UK?
Yeah. So I'm actually born in England. My mother's British. So I left there when I was 5 and we came to the States. My dad was it, from Ohio, born and raised. So we just kind of transitioned over here. But I have always loved the UK. I just think the cities are so diverse and um, just very multicultural, and everyone sort of gets along. Um, and so I actually went there for high school for sixth form, and I was going to stay there to complete my bachelor's, but I only ended up doing a year there, and then I actually moved back to the States. So I always wanted to go back to England, um, to spend a few years there. I have like amazing friends there. I have some family there. Um, uh, my husband is also there, and so I did end up going to Wales, but like I said, after the program, I just felt like it wasn't for me, and I found that out pretty quickly, like within 2 months. Um, I actually moved from Wales to England, back to my mom's hometown, actually, where I was going to high school initially, and um, that's sort of where I did the teaching certificate. Um, but it's always great to go back there. I try to go every year, um, and just reconnect. Yeah, it's a great time.
Yeah, I have to say that I've never been to the UK, but I have heard from lots of people about London being very, very, cosmopolitan, right?
Mhm.
Many different cultures intermingling, great food scene, especially
So good.
yeah, especially Indian food. They said like that's where you go to get Indian food,
Yes.
and I love Indian food. And yeah, the fact that you still have, really wonderful and, great friends and, you have family there too. So it makes a lot of sense. But at first I was like, oh, that's interesting, like Ohio, because that's where I know you are right now. But yeah, going back, it's kind of like that, second home, that place that in some ways, you yearn for maybe. Because I know for myself, I have family in Korea.
Mhm.
My mom's from South Korea, and growing up in California, I never felt a super strong connection of like, wow, I feel very Korean. I was like, well, not really. I mean, my environment was very middle, middle upper class, kind of white surfer community.
Mm.
So that was the vibe that I got. And yet I still yearned for this faraway place, and it was kind of inexplicable. But I think it's great that you have these opportunities to continuously, like kind of from like year after year, be able to like go back and revisit, reconnect,
Mhm.
be reminded of where your mom, had many of her like formative years and what influenced her. Maybe that's what it is, like we revere, we respect our parents in a way, and it's like, wow, they got to be that way, but they lived there, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a curiosity on our part of like, is there more to learn from that experience or a closeness that we get from being there? Um, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, but
Yeah.
that's I think really, really wonderful. And like you have definitely this experience kind of like comparing what life is like in London and Wales, right, for that matter, but the UK compared to like the US. I'm sure there's probably some stark differences that you can point out.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, things that you like and things that you don't like about both cultures, right?
For sure. Yeah, I would love to sort of marry the two, but I can't,
Oh,
you know. Um, so I always thought like I love the openness of the States and it's really beautiful here. Um, and I love the people here too. But there's something about the people in England that they just have this resilience that I don't know if it's just like in the pocket of people. So I was like more based in the West Midlands, but they definitely have this resilience and this way of just connecting in harder moments and keeping joy alive. So finding joy in the simple things, I think. Um, I just found it to be so much more prevalent there and almost like a part of the culture. So, yeah.
yeah, I love that. I mean, you have this like intimacy with both cultures in which you can perceive that in a way that someone like myself who doesn't really know the UK can't. But I appreciate you, kind of teasing out that one aspect of like, wow, like what does make it different, but different in like all the best ways of like I really cherish that difference. So yeah, so thank you for that. And the next part of your journey took you from the UK back to Ohio, and you mentioned it was at a local community college, right? Right? That you're currently working at, or for this next?
Not a community college, a private liberal arts
Oh,
college that
right.
I'm at right now.
Thank you for correcting me on that.
No,
Okay.
for sure.
Private liberal arts college. And yeah, and so this role that you're playing as accessibility coordinator, I know that you mentioned that it's about like lifting or removing barriers for students so that they can, have a more like I don't know if it's the words is seamless experience, but to be able to advance in their studies and feel supported throughout that journey. Um, but yeah, like could you maybe like share a little bit more about like yeah, what brings out so much joy? Maybe through a story with a student or a circumstance that really like imprinted on you that like this is what it's about. This is vibing with me, not high school no, thank you. But this, yeah.
Yeah. So I think with disability services, it really is just about, you know, leveling that playing field and making that experience equitable. I think a lot of the time when we're trying to move toward, universal design and just making it accessible for everyone, um, it only benefits everyone. Um, so I think something as simple as a student uh, perhaps coming in and feeling just really overwhelmed by their lack of, I guess, executive functioning skills, um, and feeling like there's something inherently almost like wrong with them. So carrying some of that shame when they really shouldn't feel ashamed at all. And I always try to tell my students that skills can be learned. And that's the great part about it is that they can build on those skills and they can be learned. It might not be like 100% and you might have to work like really hard at it, but it is attainable. Um, but one thing that we offer that our assistant director put into place is student academic support sessions. And so my colleague and I sort of are uh, really getting those into place. And essentially, if a student just needs someone who has knowledge of their diagnosis or their disability to just body double or help them with um, scheduling, planning, um, we offer that now. And there's also peer executive functioning tutors that we offer in our campus as well, which is great if they need someone who's like in it with them. But if they do want someone with that disability knowledge, they can opt for us as well. And those for me have been the most rewarding because um, I I see them every week, so I can see the progress that they're making. And yeah, it's really great to see a student who like it's their first day on campus and they're so overwhelmed and so anxious that they're, almost having like an anxiety attack. And then seeing them slowly just flower and someone who would only speak a few words is now like having lengthy conversations and um, feeling like they can, I don't know, just really like get through and thrive. And it really is just about supporting them with maybe a little extra time with testing, maybe letting professors know that if they do need to like knit in class, it's not that they're not paying attention, it's actually helping them focus. So accommodations are so like case by case that we have to enter into an interactive process with the student. We'll spend 45 minutes with the student initially, and we meet with every single one that needs accommodations. So it's all face to face because you can't, I mean, but I think before there's a lot of places who sort of focus on like the outdated medical model of just let's check over documentation. Does your provider recommend this accommodation? No, then you're not getting it. Instead, just really, having that person in front of you and having the conversation in, you know, no one knows them better than themselves. So yeah, just working with them. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Scott, to be real.
No, I was
I went to a full
enjoying like
tangent.
yeah, learning about the work that you do, the fact that it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to just like sit with the student and just kind of like where that student is at in that moment and really like being like, okay, we're here to support you and these are the various accommodations that we believe would suit you well so that you are less anxious, that you are less stressed out and that of course, you are successful while being here. And so, you kind of pointing out all the various um, you know, services that you're able to do is really wonderful because yeah, it definitely goes beyond just the simple checkbox like okay, this is what was recommended. You just kind of go off hearsay from some far removed provider, and
Mhm.
you're saying no, like college is a time of great change, even on like a week by week basis. So we're here to like have this conversation and also the follow-ups being very important um that while you're like a professional and you're older, you have more experience than them, and yet you can also relate to like what it was like when you were a college student yourself and that one of the big things that stood out to me as you were talking was this emphasis on empathy, really thinking about what this person's going through and doing your absolute best to make yeah, these kind of like take these actions on behalf of the student. And I feel like empathy is also really important component of global citizenship.
For sure.
Um, yeah. So, we've gone on such a journey from, the influences that your parents had on you to your formative experiences, learning about psychology and being in the UK and what the UK represents for you as well. I did not know that. I was like, oh, I just, silly, but I was like, oh yeah, Muslima, she lives in Ohio, so I guess she just was in Ohio this whole time. When, of course not, our lives like there's so much that is yeah, like I lived in Brazil, but people would probably just look at me and be like, oh, you're from California, right? And I'm like, you're right. And right, so many other things. But I feel like throughout those different like milestones that we covered, you've been very proactive in like identifying things about global citizenship that really, um, are important to highlight, like, the seeing the humanity in others, being quite receptive to diversity and appreciating difference, and then having great empathy, right? In this last one. Um, would you say that this term global citizenship is something that you hear a lot in your line of work, or would you say it's something kind of more just kind of on the periphery, or it's like more like it's talked about but not really kind of seriously engaged with? How does this term kind of like hit your ears in the current work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so my my institution is I think like specifically thinking from just my student affairs division, global citizenship is definitely at the forefront, and it's going to actually be implemented into our mission statement. So I think everyone in our division is very intentional about how can we ourselves be global citizens and how can we foster that and create dialogue on campus so that students also are able um, to embody that. Um, and so that's a term that's used often. And just, yeah, thinking about the opportunities on campus and how we can support the students in being successful global citizens.
I love that. And that's so cool that your university is is seeking to incorporate more of these values of global citizenship into their mission statement. So that was not always the case, or has it just been a long process of getting to this point?
I think with my institution, students have always been very proactive in their advocacy and um, just yeah, for being change makers. It's always been a campus that has had a rich history of uh, supporting civil rights and women's rights and the history of an institution like that. I think it just continues to build on. So it, I think the term global citizenship is now becoming that term that is needed in something more formal, but have they always been performing that? I would say yes, because when I was a child, that was our safe haven. The town of that college was our pocket of 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 goodness and kindness and acceptance. Um, that was the safe place. And so uh, the students have always been I think embodying that as well as the staff and having the staff and faculty just really drive that. I think that's always been the case, which is why it was my dream institution to end up at because I just I have so much I guess respect and appreciation um for what its population did for me when I was a child. So
I love how we've just come full circle with your experiences growing up and the sense that like especially from the story that you told, suddenly you would go from a, you know, that kind of like childlike, that whimsy of oh, everything's great. And then suddenly you experienced a direct hit, like, you know, that was an attack. And to understand that that town where this liberal arts college is located was a safe haven, was this embracing or a, you know, diverse place where you were able to experience, okay, I don't have to keep my guards up all the time necessarily. Um, and then to now be working at this college and to be able to like really continue to like put forth, you know, this, I mean, like give out this generosity of like I want others to really discover themselves and to enjoy just being a college student and go out into the world as global citizens, right? Make things better, right? That's I think really beautiful. There's this concept in Buddhism called turning poison into medicine, and I feel like the poison that was kind of shot at both you and your mom, right? That you were able to take that and create something so much more beautiful. And yeah, and I think that's amazing. That's very global citizen-y of you as well. Like seeing the bigger picture, taking the higher moral ground. It was not easy, but it was also in many ways necessary, right? Kind of rise to the occasion and you know, and over the years find yourself where you are now. And that makes you so much more relatable a person than anything else, you know, for like students who probably come to you with all like a whole variety of concerns and complex emotions and feelings, and this everything might feel tangled up. And you yourself can speak about how you've had to, you know, manually untangle a lot of complex emotions yourself. So I think that's really wonderful. All right. So thank you so much, Muslima. This has been truly a wonderful conversation and very inspiring one as well. I do have one last question for you. It's a question that I always ask my guests, and it involves either a book or like movie recommendation that you think aligns, resonates with the conversation that we've been having. So is there anything maybe more recent or it could be something you come back to frequently, like anything you'd like to recommend for the listeners?
yeah, so I have always believed that global citizenship and empathy begins in childhood. So the book recommendation that I have is a children's book, and it is called Yafa and Fatima, Shalom and Salam. Um, and that is by Fawzia Galani Williams, who is also my mother.
Oh, you have to explain a little bit more. So yeah, if you could give like, you know, like kind of like in the short description of the book,
Yeah.
what is it about?
It is about two friends, one Jewish and one Muslim, and um, it's just a story of kindness and support. And I think it's just a great way of bringing about togetherness and teaching children openness and kindness, really, because at the end of the day, if we could all be kind, we'd have a much better world.
100% agree with that. Wow, that is so cool that you can recommend a book that your mom wrote. And it again lines up with everything that we've heard about her. She is a legend.
She
And
is legend.
yeah, and I like that we're ending on a note of kindness, right? Like kind of key takeaway. And that's beautiful. So thank you so much, Muslima. We unfortunately are nearing the end of our conversation, but I wanted to give the last, word, any last thoughts or anything you'd like to share before we sign off.
I just wanted to thank you for having me and letting me talk about my mama. It's been really great.